We're only inviting you out of pity, so don't linger and don't get in the way." Those were the exact words my daughter-in-law, Harper, said to me at the door of her apartment. I just smiled and walked out in silence. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I simply left. And they believed they had won. They believed I was that foolish, submissive old woman who was going to swallow poison with a smile. But 2 weeks later, everything changed. The notifications started arriving. First, it was the bank. The financing for the apartment they were counting on to move into had been canceled. Then they discovered that the joint account where I deposited money every month was at zero, completely empty. The additional credit card Harper used for her shopping sprees was blocked, and a letter from the bank was on its way. A letter that was going to destroy all their plans. But let me tell you from the beginning, because this story doesn't start with my revenge. It starts with years of silent humiliation that no one saw. My name is Eleanor. I am 65 years old. I have been a widow for 10 years and am the mother of an only child, Liam. I raised him alone after his father, Ernest, died in a car accident when the boy was barely 8 years old. From that day on, it was just the two of us against the world. I worked double shifts, sometimes triple, so he wouldn't lack anything. I sewed uniforms in a garment factory from 6 in the morning to 2 in the afternoon, and then I cleaned offices until 10 at night. I would come home with swollen hands, eyes red from exhaustion, but I always had time to help him with his homework, to hug him, to tell him everything was going to be okay. Liam was a sweet boy. He drew me cards with colored crayons. He promised me that when he grew up, he was going to buy me a huge house where I would never have to work again. He told me he was always going to take care of me. And I believed him. With all my heart, I believed him. I watched him grow. I watched him graduate from university with honors. I watched him get an excellent job at a tech company. I watched him become a successful, independent man. And I felt so proud that sometimes my chest hurt with emotion. I thought all that sacrifice had been worth it. But then came Harper. He met her 3 years ago at a work conference. She was an event coordinator, always impeccable, always with that perfect smile that seemed practiced in front of the mirror. From the first moment I saw her, I knew something wasn't right. It wasn't a jealous mother-in-law's intuition. It was something deeper. It was the way she looked at me, as if I were a nuisance, as if I were an old piece of furniture that needed to be discarded sooner or later. At first, they were small comments, disguised as jokes. "Oh, Eleanor, you're so old-fashioned. Oh, don't worry, you rest. We'll handle it." As if I were a useless elderly woman. Liam didn't say anything. He would just smile uncomfortably and change the subject. He never defended me. Not once. Then the exclusions began. The first Christmas after they got married, they hosted a family dinner. I found out through photos on social media. Everyone was there. Harper's parents, her siblings, her cousins. Everyone toasting around a table decorated with ivory candles and crystal glasses. There were 12 seats at that table. I was not invited. When I asked Liam the next day, he told me, "It was something small, Mom, a last-minute thing. A lie." That table seated 12 people and they had planned everything weeks in advance. My 64th birthday arrived and I didn't receive a call. Not a message. Nothing. I spent the whole day waiting by the phone like a fool. At 11 at night, I received a text message. "Sorry, Mom, it slipped our minds." "Happy birthday." It slipped their minds. The birthday of the woman who sacrificed her entire life for him simply slipped their minds. Little by little, I was disappearing from their lives. They no longer asked for my opinion on anything. When I visited them, Harper always had an excuse, a headache, an urgent call, an important meeting. And I kept insisting like an idiot. I kept calling, I kept cooking their favorite meals, I kept asking if they needed anything. But Harper always rejected everything. "We're on a diet. We already bought food. Better keep it for yourself." Until that night arrived. Liam's 32nd birthday. I arrived promptly at 7 in the evening with a chocolate cake I had made with my own hands. The one my son had loved since he was a child. I rang the doorbell and waited. I heard laughter inside. Music. The sound of glasses clinking. The door opened and there was Harper in an emerald green dress, perfect makeup, hair pulled back in an elegant bun. She looked me up and down with that expression of annoyance she no longer bothered to hide. "Eleanor," she said with a fake smile. What a surprise. I was invited, I replied, confused. Liam called me this morning. She sighed as if my presence were a huge inconvenience. She stepped aside just enough for me to see inside the apartment. There were at least 15 people inside, friends of theirs, co-workers, Harper's entire family, silver balloons hanging from the ceiling, a table full of expensive food and bottles of wine. A big party, a celebration planned in detail. And then Harper said those words I will never forget. We're only inviting you out of pity, Eleanor. So don't stay long and try not to get in the way. Everyone here is important people and we don't want any awkwardness. The world stopped for a second. I felt something inside me break into 1,000 pieces. It wasn't my heart. That had already been broken many times. It was something else. It was the last hope that I still mattered to someone, that I still had a place in my son's life. I looked over her shoulder, searching for Liam. He was there, standing by the table, with a glass of wine in his hand. Our eyes met for a second. I waited for him to say something, to defend me, to tell his wife that she was completely out of line. But Liam simply looked away and continued talking to his friends as if nothing was happening. That was when I understood everything. He knew. He agreed. I really was just a nuisance to them. I didn't say anything. I wasn't going to give them the show of seeing me cry. I simply smiled. A calm, almost kind smile. I saw Harper frown, confused by my reaction. I think she expected screaming or tears, but I was already beyond that. I handed her the cake I had brought. Happy birthday to Liam, I said with a calm voice. She took it reluctantly, as if it were trash. I turned around and walked toward the elevator with my back straight and my head held high. I heard the door close behind me with a dry thud. The laughter and music continued as if nothing had happened, as if I had never been there. Inside the elevator, I saw my reflection in the metallic mirror of the doors. A 65-year-old woman with gray hair pulled back in a simple bun, dressed in a cream-colored sweater I had chosen so carefully that morning. I looked tired. I looked old. But I also looked awake, as if something inside me had just opened up after years of being asleep. I drove to my house in complete silence. The streets were illuminated with those orange city lights that always seemed sad to me. I didn't play music. I didn't cry. I just drove on autopilot while my mind processed what had just happened. We're only inviting you out of pity. Those words spun in my head over and over like a broken record. I arrived at my apartment around 10 at night. I lived alone in a small but tidy apartment in the city center. 2 bedrooms, a modest living room, a kitchen where I almost never cooked because why cook if you are alone? The walls were light beige. Everything was functional. Everything was silent. Everything was empty. I took off my shoes and sat on the sofa without even turning on many lights. Only the corner lamp projected soft shadows against the wall. I closed my eyes and let the memories come, because I needed to understand how I had reached this point, how I had allowed them to treat me like this. I thought of my mother, Margaret. She died 15 years ago, but I still heard her in moments like this. She was a tough woman, one of those who survived hard times without bending. She worked cleaning other people's houses her whole life so I could study. She never complained. She never asked anyone for anything. And when she died, she left me the only thing she had, a small house on the outskirts of the city with a garden full of mint plants and a wooden porch where we used to drink coffee in the afternoons. Eleanor, she always told me, a woman who respects herself never begs for love, not even from her own blood. I never quite understood that phrase until now, until tonight, because that was exactly what I had been doing for the last 3 years, begging for crumbs of attention from my own son. That house my mother left me was now rented to a young couple who paid $600 a month. I lived here, in this more central apartment, closer to Liam, closer to the illusion that I was still part of his life. How stupid I had been. I got up from the sofa and walked to my bedroom. I opened the closet and took a cardboard box from the top shelf. A box I had been keeping there for months without daring to really check. Inside were documents, many documents, contracts, notarized papers, things I had signed in the last 2 years because Liam had asked me to. It's just a formality, Mom. It's to speed up a process. Trust me. And I trusted, like I always trusted. Because that's what mothers do, right? We trust our children blindly, even when they are stabbing a knife into our backs. I spread all the papers out on the bed and began to read carefully, one by one, line by line. And with every page I turned, I felt the sadness transforming into something different. Into rage, into clarity, into cold determination. The first document was a mortgage loan contract. A new apartment in an exclusive area of the city, value $250,000, date of signing 8 months ago. And there, on the line for co-signers and guarantors, was my name, my signature, my identification number. I was legally responsible for that debt. If they didn't pay, the bank would come for me. They never told me that. Liam had only told me he needed my signature for some paperwork for his job. I signed without reading because I trusted him. The second document was even worse. A notarized authorization where I allowed Liam to access my complete credit history and use my name as a guarantee in future financial transactions. Basically, I had given him legal power to go into debt using my credit. And I didn't even know it. The third paper was a joint account contract. A bank account I had opened 2 years ago because Liam told me it would be easier to help each other in case of emergencies. I deposited $500 every month into that account. Money that came from my pension and the rent from my mother's house. I thought it was an emergency fund for both of us. But according to the bank statements attached, they had been withdrawing that money monthly. All of it, down to the last cent. They used it for their personal expenses, for their outings, for their whims. I sat on the edge of the bed with the papers trembling in my hands. Not from fear, from rage. They had used me. They had manipulated me. They had turned me into their personal cash cow while treating me like trash. And the worst of all is that they had done it with my own consent. Because I had signed. I had trusted. I had been so naive that I hadn't even read what I was authorizing. I looked at the clock. It was past midnight. Outside, everything was silent. I got up and walked to the kitchen. I made strong coffee, although I knew I wasn't going to sleep anyway. I poured myself a cup and sat at the small dining table with all the documents in front of me. And then I started to think, coldly, methodically, like I had never thought before in my life. If I was a co-signer on that apartment, that meant I had legal rights over the contract. If I was a joint holder of that bank account, I could move that money however I wanted. If they had used my name without explaining the real consequences to me, there was abuse of trust, possibly fraud. I grabbed my phone and started looking for information. Co-signer laws, rights of co-borrowers, how to cancel bank authorizations, how to remove your name from mortgage contracts. I was reading until 4 a.m, taking notes, underlining important things, building a plan in my head. When the sun began to rise through the kitchen window, I already knew exactly what I was going to do. And it wasn't going to be fast. It wasn't going to be loud. It was going to be silent, legal, and completely irreversible. I showered. I dressed in comfortable clothes. I gathered all the documents and put them in a gray plastic folder. At 8 o'clock in the morning sharp, I called a law firm I had found on the internet, specialists in banking and family law. "Good morning," I said when they answered. "I need an urgent consultation. I believe financial fraud has been committed using my name, and I need to know what my legal options are." They gave me an appointment for that same afternoon at 3. Perfect. I spent the rest of the morning organizing everything. I printed the bank statements from the last 2 years. I made copies of all the contracts. I made a detailed list of every deposit I had made into that joint account. Every signature I had placed, without really understanding what I was authorizing. Everything. At 2:30, I left my house with the folder under my arm. The law firm was downtown, in a tall office building with enormous windows. I took the elevator to the 12th floor. The receptionist showed me into a conference room where a lawyer of about 40 named James was waiting for me. Dark gray suit, rectangular glasses, serious but kind expression. "Mrs. Eleanor," he greeted me, shaking my hand. "Tell me what is happening." And I told him everything, from the beginning. From the moment Harper entered my son's life, from the humiliations, from the documents I signed without reading, from the bank account they drained every month, from the apartment where I was a co-signer without really knowing it. From that night at the door where they told me they only invited me out of pity, James listened in silence, taking notes in a notebook. When I finished speaking, he reviewed each document carefully, one by one, reading the fine print, verifying dates, underlining clauses. After almost an hour, he looked up and looked me directly in the eye. "Mrs. Eleanor," he said with a firm voice, "you have several options here, and all of them are completely legal." James leaned back in his chair and interlaced his fingers on the table. He looked at me with a mixture of professionalism and something that seemed like genuine empathy. He had seen cases like mine before. That was obvious. But every story of abuse has its own bitter and unique flavor. "First, let's talk about the apartment," he began, pointing to the mortgage contract. "You appear here as a co-signer and solidary co-debtor. That means if your son and your daughter-in-law stop paying, the bank can come directly for you to collect the entirety of the debt, $250,000 plus interest." I felt a knot form in my stomach. "And what can I do?" "Legally, you can request removal as a co-signer if you demonstrate that you signed under incomplete or misleading information. We have evidence here that the implications of the contract were never clearly explained to you. That is abuse of trust. We can initiate a legal process to remove you from the contract. The problem is that takes time. Months, maybe. And the quick option?" I asked, because something inside me told me I didn't have months. I needed to act now. James smiled slightly. "The quick option is more drastic. You, as a co-borrower, have the right to demand the immediate liquidation of the debt or the sale of the property if you consider that your assets are at risk. Basically, you can force the acceleration of the loan. If they cannot pay the entirety of the loan immediately, the bank executes the guarantee and the apartment returns to the financial institution. They lose the property, and you are left free of responsibility. Is that legal?" "Completely. It is stipulated in the contract. Clause 17. Section B. Co-borrowers can demand early liquidation if they consider there is a risk of non-payment. And believe me, with the history you are showing me here, any judge is going to understand that you have sufficient reasons to protect your assets." I nodded slowly. "What else?" "The joint bank account," he continued, moving to another document. "Here the situation is simpler. You are a joint holder. That means you have full rights over the money deposited. You can withdraw everything, close the account, or simply stop depositing. They cannot do anything legally to stop you. And the additional card I gave my daughter-in-law, that card is in your name. You are the primary account holder. You can cancel it whenever you want with a simple call to the bank. You don't need anyone's authorization." I felt something warm beginning to grow in my chest. It wasn't hate, it was power, control, the feeling that for the first time in years, I held the cards in my hands. "There is a third thing," James said, pulling out another paper. "This authorization you signed giving access to your credit history and allowing them to use your name as a guarantee. This is more delicate because technically you gave consent, but again, there is evidence that they did not explain the real implications to you. We can revoke this authorization immediately with a notarized document. Once revoked, any future use of your name would be illegal. How long does all this take? If you want to move fast, we can have everything ready in a week. Notarized documents, requests to the bank, legal notifications, everything. But I need to know something, Mrs. Eleanor." He leaned forward and looked at me intently. "Are you sure you want to do this? Because once we start this process, there is no turning back. Your relationship with your son is going to change forever. It might be completely destroyed." I remained silent for a moment. I thought of Liam as a child drawing me cards with crayons. I thought of all those nights I stayed awake working to give him a better life. I thought of his promises that he was always going to take care of me. And then I thought of him that night at his party, looking away while his wife humiliated me at the door. "My relationship with my son is already destroyed," I said with a firm voice. Only I was the only one who didn't want to see it. "So yes, I am completely sure." James nodded. "Very well. Then let's begin." We spent the next 2 hours reviewing every detail. I signed authorizations. I filled out forms. I gave specific instructions on how I wanted to proceed. James explained to me that the whole process would be silent. They wouldn't know anything until the official notifications started arriving. And by then, it would already be too late to stop it. I left that building around 6 in the evening. The sun was beginning to set, staining the sky orange and violet. I walked to my car with the empty folder under my arm. All the documents had stayed with James. Now they were legal evidence. Now they were my ammunition. I drove back home feeling something strange. It wasn't exactly happiness. It was something deeper. It was the sensation of having recovered my dignity, of having stopped being a victim. During the next 4 days, nothing happened. Liam didn't call. He didn't write. Absolute silence. I didn't try to contact him either. For the first time in 3 years, I wasn't running after him begging for attention, and it felt liberating. On the 5th day, I received a call from James. "Mrs. Eleanor, we have all the documents ready. Tomorrow, first thing in the morning, we are going to present the request for liquidation of the mortgage credit to the bank. We are also going to formally notify the revocation of all the authorizations you signed. Are you ready?" "Completely ready," I replied without hesitating. "Good. One more thing. I suggest that this very afternoon you go to the bank and withdraw all the money from the joint account. Leave it at 0 and cancel that additional card. Do it before they realize what is happening." I hung up the phone and stared at the wall for a moment. This was the point of no return. A war was officially declared. But there was no longer fear in me, only determination. I changed my clothes. I put on brown pants and a cream-colored blouse. I pulled back my hair. I looked at myself in the mirror. That woman staring back at me was no longer the same one who had left that apartment humiliated a week ago. This woman had cold eyes and a set jaw. This woman had awakened. I arrived at the bank at 4 in the afternoon. It was a large branch with shiny marble floors and freezing air conditioning. I approached the executive service window. "Good afternoon," I greeted with a calm voice. "I need to make a withdrawal from a joint account and cancel an additional card." The executive asked for my identification and checked my account in the system. "Mrs. Eleanor, I see you have a joint account with a balance of $1,200. How much do you wish to withdraw?" "All of it," I said without wavering. "I want to close the account completely. And I also need to immediately block the additional card number 5578. She looked at me surprised, but professional. "Are you sure? This operation is irreversible. Completely sure." She made me sign several documents. Closing authorizations, cancellation of products, permanent card block, everything. 15 minutes later, I walked out of the bank with a cashier's check for $1,200 in my purse and the satisfaction of knowing that Harper was going to try to pay for something with that card, and it was going to be declined. That night I slept deeply for the first time in weeks. Without nightmares, without anxiety, just the peaceful sleep of someone who had finally taken control of their own life. The next morning, while I was drinking coffee in my kitchen, my phone rang. It was James. "It is done," he said simply. "The bank received the request for liquidation. They are going to notify your son in the next 48 hours. He has 30 days to pay the entirety of the credit, or the property will be foreclosed. We also sent the authorization revocations. Everything is in motion." I hung up and stared at my coffee cup. My hands were shaking slightly, not from fear, from adrenaline, from anticipation. Now all that was left was to wait for the bomb to drop. 2 days of absolute silence passed. 2 days in which I continued with my normal life as if nothing was happening. I got up early, made my coffee, read the newspaper, went for a walk in the park near my house, all with a strange calm that I didn't even recognize myself. It was as if a part of me were floating above everything, observing from afar, waiting for the moment when the storm would finally explode. And it exploded on Wednesday afternoon. I was in the kitchen preparing a salad for dinner when my phone started ringing. It was Liam. I let it ring. Once, twice, 3 times, call after call. Then the messages started. Dozens of messages. I could see the notifications piling up on the screen, but I wouldn't know. Not yet. I wanted them to feel the desperation. I wanted them to sweat. After the 10th call, I finally answered. "Hello, Liam," I said with a calm voice, almost bored. "Mom, what the hell did you do?" His voice sounded high-pitched, desperate, almost hysterical. I had never heard him like that, not even when he was a child and fell off his bicycle. "Excuse me? I don't understand what you mean. Don't play dumb. The bank just notified us that we have to pay off the entire apartment in 30 days, or we lose it. $250,000. Mom, do you have any idea what you are doing? I sat on a kitchen chair and crossed my legs. I looked at my fingernails with feigned indifference. Oh, that. Yes, I exercised my right as a cosigner to protect my assets, something completely legal according to the contract you made me sign. Or did you perhaps forget to mention that you were making me responsible for a debt of $250,000? That was standard paperwork. All banks ask for cosigners. Don't be ridiculous. Ridiculous. I felt the rage beginning to boil beneath my apparent calm. Ridiculous is the word you chose? How interesting. Because I would say I was ridiculous when I signed papers without reading because I trusted my son blindly. I was ridiculous when I kept depositing $500 every month into an account that you two emptied for your whims. I was ridiculous when I showed up with homemade food and you rejected it as if it were trash. Mom, this has nothing to do with it. I interrupted him with a sharp voice. It has everything to do with it. Liam, or have you already forgotten what your charming wife told me on your birthday? We're only inviting you out of pity. Don't get in the way. Do those words sound familiar? Because they stuck with me quite well. There was silence on the other end of the line. I could hear his agitated breathing. I could imagine him standing in his living room with a red face, gripping the phone tightly, searching for what to say. Harper didn't mean it that way. He tried to defend himself with a lower voice. She was stressed. She had a lot on her mind. She didn't mean it seriously. Ah, really? And why didn't you say anything? You were standing there looking me in the eye while your wife humiliated me at your own door, and you didn't lift a finger to defend me. Not a word, Liam. Not a single word. I didn't want to cause a scene. Right, you didn't want to cause a scene. But you had no problem using my name to put me in debt without explaining the consequences. You had no problem emptying the account where I deposited money every month, thinking it was for emergencies. You had no problem excluding me from your life little by little until I became a nuisance. Do you know what is the saddest thing about all this, son? That I would have given everything for you. And you paid me with betrayal. It's not betrayal. You are my mother. You are supposed to help me. And there it was. The naked and raw truth. To him, I wasn't a person with feelings and dignity. I was a resource, a source of money and favors that he could exploit at will. And when I no longer served him emotionally, he simply discarded me, but kept my financial utility active. You're right, I said with a dangerously calm voice. I am your mother. And as your mother, I spent 30 years sacrificing myself for you. I worked double shifts, so you wouldn't lack anything. I broke my back to pay for your college. I cried with happiness when you graduated. I gave you everything I had and more. But do you know what I learned too late, Liam? That being a mother doesn't mean being your slave. It doesn't mean letting you walk all over me. And it definitely doesn't mean continuing to finance your life while you treat me like trash. Mom, please. We can't lose the apartment. We have plans. We were going to move next month. We already paid deposits. We bought new furniture. New furniture, I repeated bitterly. With the money you took out of our joint account, I suppose. The one that, by the way, I already closed. Oh, and before you ask, I also canceled the additional card that Harper used so generously. She won't be able to buy any more purses or shoes with my credit. What? Now he was shouting. You closed the account. Mom, there are automatic payments linked to that account. Utilities, subscriptions. What a pity. I guess you'll have to use your own money now. What a novel concept, right? I can't believe you are doing this. After everything we have done for you, those words were like a slap in the face. I let out a dry laugh, without humor. Everything you have done for me, enlighten me. Liam, tell me exactly what you have done for me. Invited me to your wedding where you sat me at the last table with people I didn't even know? Forgotten my birthday? Excluded me from family dinners? Treated me like an employee when you needed me to watch your dog? Made me feel like my presence was a bother? Please, tell me. I am anxious to know. Silence. A long and uncomfortable silence where I could hear voices in the background. Harper was there. I could hear her talking fast, nervous. What is she saying? Did she fix everything? Tell her she has to fix this now. Mom? Liam's voice now sounded more controlled, more calculating. That tone he used when he tried to manipulate me. I know things haven't been perfect, I admit it. But we are family. Family forgives. Family supports each other. We can't let a misunderstanding destroy everything we have. A misunderstanding? I repeated the words slowly. Is that what you call it now? How convenient. Do you know what is the saddest part, Liam? That if you had come a week ago, if you had called after that night and told me, Mom, forgive me, Harper crossed the line and I should have defended you, maybe things would be different. If you had shown even an ounce of genuine regret, maybe I would have reconsidered everything. But you didn't. A whole week passed and not a call. Not a message. Nothing. Until the bank notified you, and suddenly you remembered you have a mother. I was going to call you. Don't lie. You were never good at lying. You are calling me because you need me, not because you care about me. And that is the difference between real love and interest. Okay, you want me to apologize? I'm sorry. Happy? Now fix this. And there it was again, the true face. He couldn't even fake sincere regret. He just wanted me to solve his problem. As always. No, I said simply. What? I said no. I am not going to fix anything. You got into this mess. You fix it. You have 30 days to get $250,000. That gives you enough time to sell some of those expensive things you bought with my money. Or maybe Harper's parents can help you. After all, they are always invited to everything. It's not like that. Harper's parents don't have that money. No one we know has that money. Then I guess you will have to learn to live with the consequences of your decisions. Like I had to learn. Mom, please. Now his voice was breaking. He was crying. Please don't do this. We are all we have. You and me. We are family. I felt something inside me tighten painfully. Because that was the voice of the boy I knew. The boy who cried after nightmares, and I hugged him until he calmed down. The boy who told me I was the best mom in the world. But that boy no longer existed. That boy had turned into a man who used me and despised me in equal measure. No, Liam, I said with a firm voice despite the lump in my throat. You decided we were no longer family when you allowed them to treat me like trash. When you signed documents behind my back. When you stole my peace of mind. I am just a cumbersome old woman invited out of pity. Remember? Those were the exact words. So now this cumbersome old woman is going to do what she should have done a long time ago. Take care of herself. I hung up the phone before he could respond. My hands were shaking. My heart was pounding. But I didn't cry. There were no tears left for them. I left the phone on the kitchen table and stared at it as if it were a bomb about to explode. I knew it was going to ring again. And I was right. 30 seconds later, the screen lit up again. Liam. I declined the call. He called again. I declined again. And again. And again. After the 6th call, I simply turned off the phone. The silence that followed was strange. Heavy. But also liberating. I got up and walked to the living room window. Outside it was getting dark. The city lights were beginning to turn on one by one like concrete fireflies. People were returning to their houses after work. Life went on its normal course, for everyone except for me. Because I had just crossed a line I never thought I would cross. I went to my bedroom and opened the drawer of the nightstand. There I kept a small wooden box with mother-of-pearl inlays that had belonged to my mother, Margaret. Inside were old letters, yellowed photographs, and a worn notebook where she wrote thoughts. I opened it carefully, as if it were a sacred object. I turned the pages slowly. My mother's handwriting was firm and elegant even though she had only studied until 6th grade. I read some entries at random. Today, Eleanor turned 15. I made her a cake with the little I had. She looked at me with those eyes full of gratitude that break my heart. I wish I could give her more. I wish I could give her the world. Another entry from years later. Eleanor got married today to Ernest. He is a good man. I can see it in his eyes. He is going to take care of her. He is going to respect her. That is the only thing a mother can ask for. That her daughter finds someone who values her. And one more, written only months before her death. I am tired. My body no longer responds like before. But I am not afraid of dying. I did what I had to do. I gave Eleanor the tools to be strong. Now I only hope she uses them when she needs them. I closed the notebook carefully and held it against my chest. I am already using them. Mom, I whispered to the empty air. Sorry for taking so long. That night I didn't sleep well. Not from regret, but from adrenaline. My mind kept replaying the conversation with Liam. Every word, every tone, every pathetic justification. And the more I thought about it, the clearer I saw the truth. I had allowed all this. I had been an accomplice to my own humiliation, for fear of being left alone, for fear of losing the only son I had. But what was the point of clinging to someone who had already let go of you a long time ago? The next morning I turned on the phone. I had 53 messages, 28 missed calls, most from Liam, but there were also some from unknown numbers that were probably from Harper using other people's phones. I didn't open any messages. I didn't listen to any voicemail. I simply blocked both numbers and left the phone on the table. At 10 in the morning, the doorbell of my apartment rang. I looked through the peephole and there was Liam. He looked terrible. Deep circles under his eyes. Messy hair. Wrinkled shirt as if he had slept in it. He was alone. Without Harper. How curious that she didn't come to face the music. I didn't open the door. "Mom, I know you're there," he said with a hoarse voice. "Your car is in the parking lot. Please, open up. We need to talk." I remained silent on the other side, with my back against the wall, listening. "Mom, please. I can't lose the apartment. You can't do this to me. I am your son. Your only son." His voice broke. "I beg you, open the door." Part of me wanted to open. That maternal part that never dies completely, no matter how much they hurt you. That part that remembers changing diapers at 3 in the morning and healing scraped knees and celebrating every small achievement as if it were a miracle. But another part of me, the part that had finally awakened, knew that if I opened that door, everything would have been in vain. "Mom, Harper, says she is going to talk to you, that she is going to apologize, that everything was a misunderstanding. Just give me a chance to fix this," Harper says. They weren't even his own words. He couldn't even articulate a genuine apology without his wife dictating what to say. I heard him slump against the door. I could imagine him sitting on the hallway floor with his head in his hands. He stayed there for almost an hour, talking, begging, crying. And I listened to every word without moving, without opening, without yielding. Finally he left. I heard his steps receding down the corridor, the sound of the elevator, the silence that returned. I sat on the sofa and let out a long sigh. My hands were shaking slightly. Not from fear, but from accumulated tension. I had managed to resist. I had managed to stand firm. And that was harder than I ever imagined. The following days were a strange mixture of calm and storm. Liam tried everything. He came 3 more times to knock on my door. He waited for me in the parking lot one morning, but I simply turned around and went for a walk for 2 hours until he got tired of waiting. He sent me flowers with a card that said, "Forgive me, Mom. I love you." I left them to wither at the building's door without touching them. Harper also tried to contact me. She sent me a voice note on WhatsApp before I blocked her number. Her voice sounded forcefully sweet. "Artificial. Eleanor, it's Harper. Look, I think things were misinterpreted the other day. I didn't mean to sound rude. I was very stressed with the party organization, and I said things without thinking. You are part of this family, and we appreciate you very much. We can resolve this like adults, right? Call me when you can." I deleted the audio without finishing listening to it. She also wrote me a long message. "Eleanor, I understand that you are upset, but this is already getting out of control. It's not fair that you punish Liam for something I said. He loves you. I also appreciate you, believe it or not. We can start over. We can be a real family. But you need to take the first step and cancel that madness with the bank. It is destroying our lives. Please, think about it." For Liam, the manipulation was so obvious it was laughable. First, she tried to victimize herself, then appeal to my maternal feelings, and finally blame me for the destruction that they themselves had caused. It was a classic narcissistic manipulator's manual. I didn't respond. On Friday of that week, 2 weeks after that night at their door, I received a call from James. "Mrs. Eleanor, I have news," he said with a professional tone. "The bank confirmed the execution of the process. Your son has 18 days remaining to liquidate the credit or the property will be seized. Your son's lawyers also contacted me trying to negotiate. They want to know if you would be willing to withdraw the request in exchange for them paying you a certain amount monthly. How much do they offer? $200 a month. I laughed. A bitter and dry laugh. $200. Less than half of what I voluntarily deposited into that account. They emptied every month. That is their idea of a fair negotiation. Obviously, it is a ridiculous offer, but legally I have to inform you. Tell them no. Tell them there is no possible negotiation. Either they pay everything in the next 18 days or they lose the apartment. There is no middle ground. Understood? There is something else. Your son filed a lawsuit alleging that you are acting with malice and that your decision has no legal basis. It is a desperate attempt, but I had to inform you. I felt the rage rising in my throat. He is suing me. Yes, but don't worry. His case is weak. We have all the documentation proving that you signed under incomplete information and that you have every right to protect your assets. It won't prosper, but it does mean that this could drag on a little longer in the courts. Let him do it, I said, with a cold voice. Let him spend money on lawyers he doesn't have. Let him sink deeper. I don't care anymore. I hung up and stared at the phone. My own son was suing me. The boy I raised. The boy for whom I gave my life. He was taking me to court because I finally told him no. That night I took out a bottle of wine I had kept in the kitchen for months. I poured myself a large glass and sat on the balcony of my apartment. The air was fresh. The city shone down there like an ocean of lights. And I felt strangely at peace. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't begging. I wasn't waiting. I wasn't being invisible. I was being seen. Even if it was as the villain of his story. Even if they hated me. Even if they sued me. At least now they knew I existed. I took a sip of wine and raised the glass to the night sky. For you, Mom, I whispered. For teaching me that a woman who respects herself never begs for love. Not even from her own blood. The following days were strangely quiet. Like the silence that comes after a storm when everything is destroyed, but at least there is no more thunder. I established a new routine. I got up early. I made coffee. I read a book on the balcony while the sun came up. Simple things I had forgotten to do because I was always worried about Liam. Always thinking about how to get closer to him. How to let him know I was still there. Not anymore. One afternoon, almost 10 days after Liam's last visit to my door, I decided to do something I had been postponing for years. I drove to the outskirts of the city, to the neighborhood where I grew up, to the house my mother Margaret had left me as an inheritance. It was a small, one-story house with faded yellow walls and a terracotta-tiled roof. The front garden was full of mint plants growing wild and free. The wooden porch where we used to sit and drink coffee needed a coat of paint but was still firm. The young couple renting it kept everything decent. They paid promptly the $600 every month. They never caused problems. I parked in front of the house and sat there in the car for a long while, just looking, remembering. This house was where my mother had lived her last years. It was where I had grown up, where I had learned what it meant to work hard, where I had seen my mother come back every night with cracked hands from cleaning other people's houses so much, but always with her head held high. I took out my phone and dialed the number of the woman renting the house. She answered on the third ring. Mrs. Eleanor? What a surprise. Is everything okay? Hello, Sarah. Yes, everything is okay. Look, I'm calling you because I need to ask you something. How quickly could you guys look for another place if I needed the house back? There was a pause. Are you going to sell the house to us? Because if so, my husband and I would be very interested. We talked about that several times. That option hadn't even crossed my mind. I hadn't thought about selling. But let me ask you, how much could you offer? We have saved about $40,000. I know it's not much, but we could get a loan for the rest. The house is valued at about $80,000, according to what we saw on the internet. $80,000. It wasn't a fortune, but it wasn't little either. And suddenly an idea began to form in my head. A crazy idea, a liberating idea. Let me think about it, I told her. I'll call you in a few days. I hung up and stared at the house through the car window. What was I doing living in that small and sad central apartment when I could be here? In the place where my mother raised me. In the place that had history, that had soul, that had peace. I returned to my apartment with that idea spinning in my head. $80,000 for the house, plus the savings I had in the bank, plus my monthly pension. I could move to a cheaper place in another city. I could start from scratch. Far from here. Far from the memories. Far from Liam and Harper. Or I could move into my mother's house and rent out this apartment. The options were so many, and for the first time in years, I was the one deciding. On day 25, after the bank notification, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me respond. Mrs. Eleanor. It was an older woman's voice. Formal. Polite. Yes, who is speaking? I am Patricia, Harper's mother. Excuse me for bothering you. I got your number from a mutual friend. I need to speak with you urgently. It is about my daughter and your son. I felt my jaw tighten. Harper's mother. The woman who had always been at all the family dinners while I was excluded. The one appearing in all the photos with her non-existent grandson while I disappeared from the narrative. I have nothing to talk to you about, I said coldly. Please, just listen to me for 5 minutes. Then, if you want to hang up on me, you are within your rights. But let me explain something you might not know. Something in her tone made me hesitate. She didn't sound arrogant or manipulative. She sounded tired, defeated even. 5 minutes, I said. Thank you. Look, I know you think we are a perfect family, that we have always been on Harper's side in everything. And you are right in part. I raised my daughter to be strong, independent, successful. But I also raised her with the wrong values. I taught her that money is everything, that marrying well is more important than marrying for love. That image is worth more than feelings. I kept silent, letting her speak. When Harper met Liam, I was happy. Not because he was a good man, which he is, but because he had a good job, because he came from less, and that meant he was going to value the lifestyle we could offer him. I pushed that marriage. I planted in my daughter's head the idea that you were a nuisance, that mothers-in-law are always trouble, that it was better to keep you away. I felt the rage beginning to boil in my chest. And why are you telling me all this now? What do you want? For me to withdraw the demand from the bank? For me to forgive your daughter? And for everything to go back to how it was? No, she said with a broken voice. I don't expect anything from you. I just want you to know that I was wrong, that I destroyed something I shouldn't have destroyed, because now that everything is falling apart, now that Liam and Harper are desperate, now that they have come to beg me to lend them money I don't have, just now I see the monster I helped create. They don't have the money? I asked with genuine curiosity. No, my husband and I are retired. We live on a pension. The house where we live still has a mortgage. We don't have $250,000. No one in our family has that amount. And believe me, Harper has called every relative we have begging for help. Something inside me felt strangely satisfied with that information. It wasn't joy exactly. It was justice. They thought they could use my name, my credit, my money, and that I was simply going to accept it because we were family. They never calculated that I could say enough. Mrs. Eleanor, Patricia continued, I don't know you. I don't know what kind of woman you are. But from the little I have seen in these days of desperation, I can say that you raised a son who had everything he needed. Education, opportunities, and he chose to waste that. He chose to bite the hand that fed him. That is not your fault. It is his fault, and it is also my fault for influencing my daughter to treat you like that. Why are you telling me all this? I asked with a tired voice. Because someone has to ask for your forgiveness. And that someone is me. Harper still doesn't understand what she did. Liam still thinks he is the victim. But I do understand. And I know no apology is going to repair the damage. But I still needed to tell you. There was a long silence. I could hear her ragged breathing on the other end. Maybe she was crying. Your apology changes nothing, I said finally. The bank is going to execute the apartment in 5 days if there isn't full payment. That is already out of my hands. I know. And I am not asking you to change your decision. I just wanted you to know the truth. That not all people in this story are bad. That some were simply foolish, and that sometimes we realize too late. She hung up before I could respond. I sat there with the phone in my hand, looking at the screen turning dark again. Harper's mother had just apologized, not to manipulate me, not to change my decision, just because she needed to do it. And for the first time in weeks, I felt something akin to understanding. Not forgiveness, but understanding. The damage was done. There was no turning back. But at least now I knew someone understood why I had done it. The last 5 days before the deadline expired were the strangest of this entire nightmare. There was a tense calm in the air, like when you know a storm is approaching, but you still don't know how destructive it will be. I continued with my routine. Coffee in the mornings, walks in the park, readings on the balcony, but always with the phone nearby, waiting. James called me on day 28. Mrs. Eleanor, your son's lawyers made a final offer. They proposed that you accept a payment plan. They would pay $5,000 monthly for the next 50 months until the entire debt is liquidated. In exchange, you would withdraw the request for immediate execution. I did the math mentally. $5,000 for 50 months. $250,000. Mathematically, it worked. But there was a huge problem with that proposal. James, where are they going to get $5,000 a month if they don't even have the full $250,000 now? Liam earns well, but not that well. And as I understand it, Harper left her job 6 months ago. Exactly my point. It is a promise they cannot keep. In 3 or 4 months they are going to stop paying, and you are going to be left in the same situation, but worse. Because you will have lost time, and they will have continued living in that apartment without consequences. Then the answer is no. I thought so. I will communicate it to them. Mrs. Eleanor, prepare yourself. In 2 days the bank is going to execute the foreclosure. Your son is going to lose the apartment, and he will probably try to contact you in more desperate ways. Are you ready for that? As ready as I can be, I replied, although I wasn't sure if it was true. That night I couldn't sleep well. Not from guilt, but from anticipation. I knew what was coming was going to be brutal. Liam wasn't the type of person who accepts defeat quietly. And I was right. On day 29, at 7 in the morning, someone began to ring my apartment doorbell insistently, over and over without stopping. I got out of bed with my heart racing and looked through the peephole. It was Liam, but he didn't come alone. Harper was with him. Both looked terrible. He with a beard of several days, deep circles under his eyes, wrinkled clothes. She with unwashed hair tied back in a messy ponytail, without makeup, dressed in gray sweatpants as if she had just gotten out of bed. "Mom, open the door," Liam shouted, pounding with his fist. "I know you're there. Open up." I didn't open. I stayed on the other side with my back against the wall, breathing deeply, trying to stay calm. "Eleanor, please." Now it was Harper who spoke. Her voice sounded hoarse, desperate. "We need to talk. Tomorrow we lose everything. Everything. Do you understand? We are going to be on the street. We won't have anywhere to live," shouted Liam. "We signed a lease to leave this apartment next month. We already paid the deposit. We bought furniture. We had plans. And you are destroying them over a tantrum. A tantrum." He called my dignity a tantrum. "It is not a tantrum, Liam," I shouted back from inside. I could no longer stay silent. "It is a consequence. Something you never learned because I always rescued you from everything. Then rescue me now. One last time. I swear we are going to change. We are going to include you in everything. We are going to value you. But you need to do this for me." "One last time?" I repeated bitterly. How many last times have I heard that phrase in my life, Liam? How many times did I ask you for one more chance? How many times did I forgive things I shouldn't have forgiven? And I always ended up in the same place. Invisible. Used. Despised. "Eleanor, I apologize," shouted Harper. "What I told you that night was horrible. I admit it. I was angry about other things and took it out on you. But I didn't mean it seriously. I didn't want to hurt you." "Lie," I shouted with all the strength I had. "Of course you meant it seriously. You've been treating me like trash for 3 years. That night you just said out loud what you always thought. And the worst of all is that Liam let you. He let you humiliate me. He chose your side over and over again." I heard sobs from the other side. Harper was crying. Liam was crying. But I no longer felt compassion. Those tears arrived too late. After years of contempt. After months of being treated like a nuisance. After using my name to get into debt without my real knowledge. After emptying the account where I deposited my money with so much effort. "Mom," Liam's voice was now barely a broken whisper. If you do this, if you let the bank take the apartment, I am going to be left with a destroyed credit history. I won't be able to rent anything decent. I won't be able to buy another property for years, maybe for decades. My professional life is going to suffer. Everything I built is going to crumble. Welcome to the consequences, I said with a cold voice. I built my life brick by brick, working double shifts, cleaning, sewing, sacrificing, and I built it to give you a future. But you chose to destroy my present. So now you are going to learn what I always knew, that in this life nothing is free, that actions have a price, and that when you betray the one who gave you everything, you end up losing everything. You can't be so cruel, sobbed Harper. We are family. Family. I let that word float in the air for a moment. Family doesn't use you. Family doesn't humiliate you. Family doesn't make you feel like you are extra. You decided I wasn't family a long time ago. I am just accepting your decision. Please. Liam pounded the door with desperation. I will pay you every cent. I will get a second job. Whatever. But don't do this to me. I am not doing anything to you that you didn't do to yourself. You used my name. You signed contracts without explaining to me. You emptied my account. You excluded me from your life. And when I finally reacted, when I finally said enough, what did you do? You sued me, your own mother. So don't come now asking me for mercy when you had none with me. There was a long and heavy silence on the other side of the door. I only heard ragged breaths and choked sobs. Then Liam spoke again, but this time his voice was different. He was no longer begging. There was something dark in his tone. All right, he said slowly. If that is what you want, if you want to destroy me, if you want me to lose everything, go ahead. But I want you to know something. Mom, this doesn't end here. I am going to remember this for the rest of my life. I am going to remember that when I needed you most, you turned your back on me. That you chose revenge over your own son. And when you are truly old, when you are sick, when you need help, I am going to remember this day, and I'm going to give you exactly the same thing you are giving me now. Nothing. Those words went through me like knives. Because they were the final confirmation of what I always suspected. To him, I only had value as long as I was useful. And now that I no longer served his purposes, he threatened me with abandonment, as if he hadn't spent the last 3 years abandoning me emotionally, as if his future absence were a worse punishment than his present contempt. Liam, I said with a trembling but firm voice, I am already old. I am already alone. I already know what it's like for you to abandon me. I have been living that abandonment for 3 years. So your threat doesn't scare me. I already lost my son a long time ago. I just took a while to realize it. I heard steps walking away. The sound of the elevator. The doors closing. Silence. I let myself fall to the floor with my back against the door. The tears finally came. Not of sadness, but of liberation. It was over. Everything was over. There were no more pleas. There were no more manipulations. There were no more false hopes of reconciliation. I stayed there sitting on my living room floor for I don't know how long, crying in silence, letting out years of accumulated pain, years of feeling small, years of begging for love, years of being invisible. When I finally got up, I walked to the balcony. The sun was coming up. A new day was beginning. And for the first time in years, that new day was mine alone. I grabbed my phone and wrote a message to James. Let the bank proceed. No more negotiations. It is over. His reply arrived 5 minutes later. Understood. Tomorrow at 9 in the morning, the foreclosure is formally executed. The apartment returns to the bank. Your name remains clean of all responsibility. You did it, Eleanor. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. I had done it. I had recovered my life. I had recovered my dignity. And although it hurt, although the price had been losing my son forever, at least now I could look at myself in the mirror without feeling shame. Day 30 dawned gray. Heavy clouds covered the sky as if the city itself knew something important was about to end. I woke up early, at 6 in the morning, although I had barely slept 3 hours. I made coffee and sat on the balcony wrapped in a beige blanket. The air was cold. November always brought that cold that gets into your bones and doesn't let go. At 9 o'clock sharp, just as James had said, I received the official notification from the bank. A formal email with legal language that basically said, "The property located at Alameda Street number 243, apartment 502, has been seized for non-payment. The occupants have 72 hours to vacate voluntarily or forced eviction will proceed." Attached came a PDF document with official seals and digital signatures. I read it 3 times, every word, every clause. And when I finished, I closed the email and stared at the blank screen of my phone. It was done. After 30 days of silent war, after tears and pleas and threats, after being called cruel and vindictive, it was done. Liam and Harper had lost the apartment. I didn't feel joy, nor sadness, just a strange emptiness. Like when you finish reading a very long book and don't know what to do with the time you used to dedicate to reading it. I dressed calmly. Black pants, gray sweater, comfortable shoes. I pulled my hair back in a low bun. I looked at myself in the mirror. The wrinkles around my eyes seemed deeper. The tiredness of the last weeks showed on my face. But there was also something different. My eyes no longer had that look of permanent pleading. There was no longer that constant anxiety of waiting for someone to validate me. There was something firmer there, something that looked like peace. I decided to go out. I couldn't stay locked in the apartment all day thinking about what had just happened. I drove aimlessly for a while until, without realizing it, I ended up in the same place as always, in front of my mother's house on the outskirts of the city. This time I got out of the car. I walked through the front garden feeling the plants crunch under my shoes. The fresh and green smell filled my lungs. I walked up the 3 steps of the wooden porch which creaked under my weight. I sat in the old rocking chair my mother had bought at a flea market decades ago. From there I could see the quiet street, the trees moved by the wind, an older lady walking her dog, a child on a bicycle, the simple and slow life of a neighborhood where nothing urgent ever happened. And I asked myself why I had spent the last years living downtown, in that small and noisy apartment, when I could have been here, in this place that smelled of my childhood, of my mother, of more honest times. I took out my phone and called Sarah, the tenant. "Mrs. Eleanor? How are you?" "Good, Sarah. Look, I have been thinking about what we talked about the other time, about selling the house. Did you make a decision?" "Yes, I am not going to sell you the house." I heard a sigh of disappointment on the other end, but I continued. "But I am going to give you 3 months' notice to find another place. I am going to move here. I need this space. I need this place." There was a pause. "I understand. 3 months is enough time. Thank you for letting us know in advance. You have been a good landlady all these years." I hung up and stared at the house. My house. The place where I was going to start over. At my 65 years, I was going back to the beginning. But this time not as a scared girl, but as a woman who finally knew her worth. The phone vibrated. A message from an unknown number. I opened it cautiously. "I hope you are happy. We are left with nothing. No apartment, no credit, no future. All because of your selfishness. But relax. Someday you are going to need something from us, and that day you are going to remember what you did." It was from Harper. I recognized her writing style full of drama and victimization. I didn't respond. I simply blocked the number. I no longer had energy for her manipulations. 5 minutes later, another message arrived. Another unknown number. This time it was longer. "Mom, today they gave us the official notification. We have 3 days to get our things out of the apartment. 3 days to dismantle the life we built, the furniture we bought, the plans we had, everything destroyed. And the worst of all is that you don't even feel remorse. You believe this is justice, but it is just cruelty. You are a bitter woman who couldn't stand seeing her son happy, who couldn't stand that I chose my wife over you, because that is what really bothers you, right? That you are no longer the center of my world, that you can no longer control me. Well, congratulations. You achieved your revenge. But you lost your son forever. I hope it is worth sleeping alone the rest of your life, knowing that you were the one who destroyed this family." I read the complete message without emotions. Every word was designed to hurt me, to make me feel guilty, to manipulate me one last time. But it no longer worked, because I knew the truth. I didn't destroy anything. I just stopped holding up something that was already broken. I wrote a reply. The first and last one I was going to give them. "Liam, I didn't destroy your life. I just stopped financing it. I didn't ruin your future. I just protected mine. I didn't abandon you. You abandoned me years ago when you chose contempt over respect, when you chose comfort over honesty, when you chose to use my name without my real knowledge. I gave you 30 years of my life. I gave you everything I had, and you paid me with humiliation. So no, I don't regret it. I don't feel guilt. I only feel relief that I can finally live without carrying people who don't value me. I wish you the best, seriously. I hope you learn from this. I hope you grow. I hope someday you understand that love is not using people until they are no longer useful. But that is no longer my problem. Take care. I sent the message and blocked that number too. I turned off the phone completely. I didn't want to know more. I didn't need to know more. I stayed sitting on that porch for hours, watching the sun move across the sky, watching shadows change places, watching life go on with or without drama, with or without Liam, with or without the pain of the last weeks. When it began to get dark, I entered the house. Sarah had left everything spotless. The floors shone. The windows were clean. It smelled clean and like lavender. I walked through the rooms empty of furniture, but full of memories. The room where I slept as a girl. The kitchen where my mother made coffee every morning. The living room where we sat to watch television on that old set, which took 5 minutes to turn on. And I realized something important. This house never felt empty even if there was no one, because it was full of true love. Of the love of a woman who worked until she destroyed her hands so her daughter would have opportunities. Of the love that asks for nothing in return. Of the love that doesn't manipulate or control or humiliate. That was the type of love I had given Liam, and that was the type of love he had despised. But that no longer defined me, because I was more than just Liam's mother. I was Eleanor, daughter of Margaret, a 65-year-old woman who had survived losses and betrayals and years of feeling invisible, and who had finally found the strength to say, no more. I left the house and locked the door. I went back to my car. I drove back to my apartment with the windows down, letting the cold wind hit my face. And for the first time in months, maybe in years, I felt light, as if I had dropped a weight I carried on my shoulders for so long that I didn't even remember what it felt like to walk without it. That night, when I got home, I prepared a simple dinner. Pasta with tomato sauce, toasted bread, a glass of red wine. I sat at my small dining table and ate slowly, savoring every bite, without rushing, without anxiety, without checking the phone waiting for someone to need me. And when I finished, I washed the dishes, turned off the lights, put on my pajamas, and lay in my bed. I closed my eyes. And for the first time in 30 days, I slept deeply. Without nightmares, without guilt, without fear. Just the peaceful sleep of someone who had finally chosen their own peace over the comfort of others. 3 months later, everything had changed. It was February, and the heat was beginning to arrive with that intensity that makes you seek shade at any time of day. I was already completely settled in my mother's house. I had sold most of the furniture from my previous apartment and bought new things for this place. Things I chose, things I liked. An olive green sofa, white linen curtains, an old wooden table I found at an antique market and restored with my own hands. The front garden was now better cared for. I pruned the mint plants every week. I planted soft pink roses in the corners. I painted the porch white and changed the old rocking chair for a new one, but of the same style. This place had become my sanctuary, my refuge, my true home. I had established a simple and comforting routine. I got up with the Sunday I made coffee in the Italian coffee maker that had belonged to my mother. I went out to the porch to read while drinking my first cup of the day. Then I walked through the neighborhood for an hour. I greeted the neighbors who already knew me, the lady with the dog, the man who sold homemade bread at his house, the children going to school. In the afternoons, I sometimes cooked, recipes I had forgotten. Recipes my mother taught me as a child: lentil soup, chicken and rice, sweet bread. I cooked not because someone asked me to, but because it gave me pleasure, because the smell of food filled the house and made me feel alive. At night, I read or watched old movies. Sometimes I called a distant cousin with whom I had reconnected after years. We talked about life, about memories, about nothing important. And that was enough. I hadn't heard anything from Liam directly again, But once, walking downtown when I went to do some paperwork at the bank, I saw him from afar. He was coming out of an office building. He looked thinner, more tired. The suit he was wearing was the same one I knew from 2 years ago. He no longer had that air of confidence that always characterized him. He walked with slumped shoulders, looking at his phone, completely absorbed in his own world. I hid behind a post, not because I was afraid, but because I didn't want the drama. I didn't want the confrontation. I didn't want to break the peace that I had worked so hard to build. I saw him get on a public bus. He, who always showed off his latest model car, the car he probably had to sell to pay debts. I felt something. It wasn't satisfaction exactly, nor was it sadness. It was something more like acceptance. He was living the consequences of his decisions, and I was living the peace of mine. One afternoon in March, I received a call from James. "Mrs. Eleanor, how are you? We haven't spoken in a while." "Very well, James." "Settled in. The whole legal matter is closed. The lawsuit your son had filed was completely dismissed. The judge ruled in your favor on all points. Your name remained completely clean. There is no debt associated with you. You are officially free." Officially free. Those words sounded like music. Thank you, James. For everything. For guiding me in this. For not judging me. There is nothing to thank. You did the right thing. And I hope you can now enjoy your life without that weight on you. I hung up and stared at the garden through the living room window. Free. After years of carrying responsibilities that didn't belong to me. After years of feeling tied to people who drained me emotionally. Finally, I was free. That same week, something unexpected happened. I was watering the garden plants when I saw a car park in front of my house. It was a modest car, white, belonging to Patricia, Harper's mother. She carried a bouquet of yellow flowers in her hands. I tensed immediately. I didn't know what to expect. But she walked toward me with a slow, almost shy step. "Eleanor," she said with a soft voice. "Sorry for coming without warning. I know you might not want to see me, but I needed to do this." "What thing?" I asked, without hostility but without warmth either. "To bring you this." She handed me the flowers, "and to tell you that you were right. About everything. My daughter and your son are now living in a small apartment in a cheap area. Liam had to get a second job. Harper had to go back to work. They are struggling. They are paying consequences. And do you know what is the saddest part? That finally they are learning. Learning what? That life owes them nothing. That they cannot use people. That respect is earned, not demanded. Harper called me crying last week. She told me she now understands everything you did for Liam, because she is working 10 hours a day and barely makes enough to cover expenses. And only now does she realize what it means to sacrifice for someone. I am glad they are learning," I said sincerely. "Seriously. I don't wish them harm. I just wanted them to understand." They understood. Too late, maybe, but they understood. Patricia looked me directly in the eye. "Do you think someday you can forgive them?" I thought about it for a long moment. "I don't know. Maybe. But not now. Now I need to heal. I need to live for me. For the first time in decades, I need to think about Eleanor before thinking about everyone else." She nodded with understanding. "It is fair. Very fair. I just wanted you to know that if someday, in the future, you decide to give them another chance, I think now they will value it. But if you don't do it, I also understand. No one has the right to ask you for more than what you already gave." She said goodbye with a brief hug and left. I stayed standing there with the bouquet of flowers in my hands. I put them in a vase with water and placed them on the dining table. They were pretty, simple, like this new life I was building. The following weeks were quiet. I started taking pottery classes at a community center near home. I met other women my age, some widows like me, others divorced, others simply alone, but all with stories, all with scars, all learning to live again. One afternoon, while I was molding a clay cup on the wheel, one of them asked me, "Eleanor, do you have children?" The question took me by surprise. Before I would have answered automatically, "Yes, a son." But this time I thought better of it. "I had a son," I said slowly. "But we no longer have a relationship. It was painful but necessary." She nodded without judging. "Sometimes biological family is not real family. Sometimes real family is the one we choose. the one that respects us, the one that values us. She was right, and I was beginning to build that chosen family. With these women from the workshop, with my neighbors, with my cousin, with the people who treated me with dignity. One night in April, almost 6 months after everything that had happened, I was sitting on the porch watching the stars when I felt a deep peace flood me completely. It wasn't euphoric happiness. It was something better. It was contentment. It was the feeling of being exactly where I should be, of having made the right decisions, even if they were the hardest ones. I thought of my mother, Margaret, of how she would have been proud to see me now, of how she would have applauded my courage, of how she would have said, "That's how it's done, daughter. That's how one defends one's dignity." And I thought of all the women who are going through the same thing I went through, those who are being used, those who are being despised, those who are begging for love from people who don't value them, and I wanted to tell them something. I wanted them to know there is a way out, that there is life after pain, that it is never too late to choose yourself. Because if someone out there is living something similar to what I lived, if someone feels invisible in their own family, if someone is carrying people who only look for them when they need them, I want them to know this. You are not selfish for setting boundaries. You are not cruel for protecting your peace. You are not a bad person for saying enough. You deserve respect. You deserve true love. You deserve to be valued. And if you have to walk away from your own blood to find your tranquility, it is okay. It is more than okay. Because at the end of the day, the person you have to live with every day of your life is yourself. And you deserve to be able to look at yourself in the mirror without shame. I lost my son, that is true, but I found myself, and it turned out that was worth much more than I ever imagined.